I'm Erica Lukes, host of UFO Classified. For me, life isn't simply black and white. Life is full of many unknowns. It is my goal to travel the world and to work with the world's leading experts in the hopes of making groundbreaking discoveries. Join me on UFO Classified Friday nights at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, only on KCOR.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Well, it must be Friday night because that means I'm here and I'm hanging out with all of my favorite people. I get into chat and see each and every one of you who supports the show and contributes and really helps to get the word out. I appreciate you being here, and I've learned so much about each and every one of you. I want to give a big shout out to Northern UFOs for always supporting the show. Mike K, all of you, you mean the world to me. I'm here for you. I love hearing your stories. And I also want to give a mention to Irv Brock, who is a wonderful person who has sent me pieces of his art over the years. And he did a portrait of me, and I was very, very honored. He's a gifted artist. When each of you reaches out to me, that it affirms the fact that I'm here and I'm doing the right thing, because I most certainly am not doing this to be the queen of UFOs or to get props from a group of people. I'm doing this because I care about the subject and I care about each of your experiences, and we are in this together, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I did a 90-minute interview today with John Greenwald, which is available. It's a video interview. You can go to the Black Vault. It's on YouTube. So listen to that. It gives you a bit of ideas from where, I'm coming from. If you guys are new and don't really have an understanding of the work that I've done over the years, and also about some of my thoughts on the games at hand and the disinformation or delusional thinking that we see that is unfortunately ufology. So hopefully we can steer clear of that. I want to, if Barry Greenwood is listening, Barry Greenwood and Jan Aldrich, they are out doing important preservation work on all of our behalf. So I hope they're having fun and listening to the show. And I am now thrilled to be here with somebody that I, thanks to Barry Greenwood, finally got a hold of a few years ago, actually back in 2017, I believe. And I had found Greg's book, Examining the Earthlight Theory, the Yakima UFO Microcosm. And to me, when I found things that I really wanted to study, I knew that I needed to reach out to him and become acquainted with him and get to learn more about his inner workings, which I have done, and I do not regret that, because he has done a great deal of work, and I'm very privileged that he has shared that with me over the years. Greg Long is an associate of the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies, known as QFOS, and was a field investigator from MUFON, and had a sighting he became interested in 75. In 81, he began investigating Yakima, and I'm going to let him tell that story. He is a beautiful, I was reading, Greg, and I just have to say welcome to the show, but when I read your book, and I've been rereading it, you are so eloquent with the way you describe things. I can't believe it. This is one of my top 5 books of all time.
Well, thank you very, very much for the flattery.
Well, I'm not saying that lightly. I really mean this. And I encourage people, because this book is out of print, and I was just looking, and it's now going for $85 on Amazon. So I would highly suggest, go out and get this. This needs to be on your shelf.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on, Erica. Glad to be back on. Yeah, that book was published in 1990, so we're talking about, almost 30 years ago. I really can't believe that. But, it did quite well when it was published. QFOS funded it and published it, and I was really grateful for that. J. Allen Hynek had gone out to the reservation years earlier and met Bill Vogel, who's no longer living, but he was the chief fire control officer, and he met him, who had seen these balls of light, which I guess we can certainly talk about, huh? And the fire lookout said he managed, and other witnesses, and he was quite impressed with it. But Vogel was a little disappointed in Dr. Hynek because nothing came of some support to be able to go out in the field and at least get photographic evidence and, if possible, more sophisticated measurements using some different instruments. And I guess I can say this for the first time, but why not? He either told me in a letter, or I remember reading it, that he called J. Allen Hynek a kind of a beady-eyed professor. I don't. Oh. That's not a pleasant thing, but he was angry. He was kind of angry and disappointed in CUFOS. And Dr. Hynek, I don't want to get off on Dr. Hynek too much because he was obviously one of the great, founders of ufology. But Dr. Hynek was always running from one place to the next. He would hear about areas where there was concentrated sightings. Something seemed to be objectively there, and he would go there, sort of blow into town and blow out of town, and go on to another site or to on television or radio. He was pretty much media oriented. But in any event, later what happened is David Akers, who is a civil engineer who lives in the Seattle area. I don't know David Akers. I know David Akers, but I was about to say I don't know how he got actually involved out at Yakima. I don't know how that happened, but he did somehow befriend Vogel. And Akers finally did a field study. He went up on some of the fire lookout towers. He took excellent photographs. He had some experiences that to me were UFO-like, feeling that there was a presence behind him and turning and seeing a ball of light near him. And he continues, my latest correspondence with him, he continues to go out there. I don't know how periodically. He's getting along in age. I think he might be close to 78, I believe. So I've encouraged him to write something before his time is up and try to put together, more information on Yakima, because I haven't had that much time to go back recently. But the book was an outcome of Bill Vogel's files. He had a 3-inch binder of files, and I met Akers, and Akers gave me an interview and supplied some of his own photographs. And I just told Bill Vogel and Akers this needs to be documented in a more interesting way than a mass of just reports in a notebook. So I began that process, and it was quite difficult in some ways. I mean, there's so many reports, and many of them seem to correlate with each other, but there's also, in addition to the balls of light, which are the predominant UFO scene there was the reports of what has come to be called, of course, craft-like objects, structured-looking objects, daylight sightings of objects that were silver in appearance, and that sort of thing. And that's been the problem with ufology from its beginning, is the plethora of different objects of different shapes and dimensions. They seem to behave, though, in a similar fashion in many ways. And the ball of light, I don't know. I know you had a sighting, Erica, of balls of light. I don't know what role the ball of light plays in that. But I think, if Barry and Jan Aldrich and others can preserve this data and provide much more of that data than Yakima to researchers, I'm sure there's wonderful pattern analysis that can be done, which could look at the not only the shapes of these objects, but their behaviors. Right. What are they doing? Because they could very well have distinct operations, if you will, or distinct purposes that we just don't understand, whether they're all from one source or they're independent from multiple sources. But it's worth taking at least one type of UFO, this orange ball of light, and looking at it where there's reliable evidence in different places with multiple witnesses, preferably independent ones, photographic evidence. Hopefully there are some reports by for example, military personnel or police or people who are in some sort of leadership position and have some sort of experience in observing things and are rational, level-headed. So that's how the book came to be. It was Bill Vogel's material with David Akers contributing to it, and so I worked it through, and Kufos reviewed it and gave me a lot of ideas on how to improve it, and it was finally published. And I think it was pretty well received. It seems to be mentioned every once in a while. When I go on the web, I find some references that people have found it. So
absolutely, Dr. Michael Swords. I mean, whom I hold in high regard. I mean, he mentions you and your work and your contribution, and people that Erling Strand. I mean, people that I really look up to mention your work. You are held in very high regard.
Well, I hope. I mean, that's nice to hear that. It's nice to know that I'm contributing something to the field. Since I'm getting along in years, I'm still plugging away at the subject of balls of light. Because I think in a couple of correspondences you were wondering how my book was coming. I am working either on a book. I don't know what it's going to be ultimately. I have to fit it into my schedule. But I have, since Yakima, I started collecting as many balls of light reports that I could find, and have found in the process there have been other areas of the country, and I think some of these may be known to your audience. I think you know of these. Utah, and Frank Salisbury working with, what's the name of the...
Junior Hicks.
Junior Hicks. I have a copy of that classic book. I call it a classic. The Utah UFO display meaning there seems to be objects that are performing for some purpose we don't understand, maybe a form of communication or what have you. But if you look at that book, there's balls of light in there, a lot of these balls of light, and they typically are orange, but they can be reddish orange. There's another set of white balls of light, and statistically, I don't know whether there are fewer sightings of white balls of light than orange balls of light, but they do have range in different colors. There's some blue ones that seem to be a minority. Sometimes there are green ones and purple ones. But the sightings on the Yakima reservation, I looked at them all in terms of color, and the predominant color was orange. Now that may give some indication of the power source to these. If they're a craft with like an envelope of ionized gas surrounding the craft when it's either powering up or hovering or what it's doing, or there is no sort of envelope or shroud around it, which is a result of electromagnetic radiation, but there really is just a ball there, a form of plasma, which would account for the color. But that's the conundrum with UFOs, is that, we're dealing with human perception and some of these are short-lived sightings, and they can only give us sometimes, kind of the shape and what they did and how long it lasted, and they're usually in awe or startled or even shocked by what they've seen. And so you've got to sort of sort through those if you look at the overall literature and find those that seem to be better reports than others, ones that don't suggest that this could be merely a planet that's being seen through haze. Aircraft lights, of course. There are amber-colored lights on some planes where they appear to be amber during weather phenomena where there's a great deal of dust in the air, for example, particulate matter, and that sort of thing. So, Erica, you said before the nocturnal lights, and of course balls of light can be seen during the day, but nocturnal lights, of those there are balls of light. You said before that they seem to be neglected, nocturnal lights. Whereas I think they could hold a significant key to the whole mystery.
And praise the Lord, amen. I mean, sweet hallelujah. You have, and that's why I gravitated towards you and people that actually took this, that had been studying this. I mean, you look at Dr. Harley Rutledge's work back in Piedmont, and I mean, James Bunnell, all of these people who've actually done very significant work about the same types of things. And so I think it's important, and for me, it gets very frustrating to watch people who sit behind a computer keyboard and and think that they're going to dismiss things because, and this is one of the favorite sayings that I've heard from certain people who might be too lazy, you know, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck or whatever, that it's such a silly phrase, you know, then you've got to rule it out. And it's like, no, that's just kind of a lazy man's approach, I think.
Yeah, the famous armchair professor or armchair expert,
right?
Sitting in his living room, watching a few documentaries on TV, and maybe saw something in the sky, but he never really looked into it, and he just kind of is attached himself to the subject because what it does, it stimulates a lot of speculation and ideas about space travel, aliens, alien visitation. And that's, that's kind of a fan, I guess you might say, of the UFO subject, but it's not really a ufologist per se. Someone who wants to devote a significant part of their life. I mean, that's what it's going to take to. And so I have devoted quite a number of hours of my life. I've been going through, Erica, a lot of letters that I saved over the years. I would luckily, when I send a letter, and these would go out to fellow investigators and researchers, I would make a copy of that letter so I knew what I said to the person receiving it. I'm kind of shocked by how many I wrote, but, a lot of them just never answered, which kind of suggests in a way what you're pointing at is that, there are people who join organizations and they're all excited about it, but they don't want to do any work and track down reports and go out in the field, so they become experts, and when they get a letter from someone who's doing some serious work, I don't know whether I cowed them or whatever it was, but there's many of these that were never answered, and I'm going to have to throw out some of the letters I sent because they don't add a lot to what you and I are talking about.
Oh,
They're
please
really
don't.
Reaching out and asking, do you have anything?
Oh, don't throw anything out. I guess this is like the Barry Greenwood. I'm channeling Barry Greenwood. Don't do it.
Well,
because
what I'm saying, yeah, I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is I wrote a whole bunch of letters to people in South America, and I think I got one response, but I just came across just a large, about half a dozen of them. And I don't have responses from them. Now, there could be the language problem, they don't know English. It could be, I don't know what it could be, but, yeah, well, I can keep some of those. If you want to look at them, you can certainly look at them. But I am keeping those where the responses where some of these people actually saw balls of light. Little advertisements appeared in a lot of the newsletters, and I did get letters occasionally just out of the blue, and I was quite amazed by it, and carried on some correspondence with them about what they've seen. So I've got my own letter responses. I've copied through MUFON all their journals up until recently. The UFO News Clipping Service, that was Louis Farrish.
Right. I have those in my archive. I'm very proud to say that it's incredible.
Wow, yeah. Well, they may have something there. You'd have to go through them all. Utah, of course. You mentioned, of course, you're interested in Skinwalker Ranch. So there may be some things that are clues for you there in the News Clipping Service. But I went through that. I went through all of Kufos's publications. I went through a lot of the popular newsstand magazines. UFO Report, I think, was one. Dawn Acker. And I can't remember her name. She was a co-editor. But
was it Vicky?
I also
was it his wife?
A whole passel of newsletters that I subscribed to.
Right.
And the articles that I found in the newspaper. I mean, it goes on and on. A ufologist, if you're really interested in the subject and you want to know a lot, you're going to have to start collecting stuff because the history of it is long and it's fairly complex. There's a lot of people in the field, were in the field, or no longer in the field, and many of their findings have vanished. Barry's trying to find those people and let it be known that he would love to be able to scan, what they managed to do. They may think it's not very important, but, as the overall breadth of the subject is looked at, they may hold some very valuable, clues to these things. So anyway, I'm working on, it may be a book, it may be monographs, a single report, and I've gotten off my duff recently. Well, I don't want to imply that I'm lazy, but I found the time. Let's put it that way. I found the time to go into some drafts that I've been putting together of these reports, and I hope that'll see the light of day. Now, you mentioned Rutledge. Now, Rutledge, I did write a whole chapter on Rutledge. And, of course, the ball of light, and he says that in his book, Project Identification, the UFO that was most often seen was the orange ball of light. And, that whole area, the Ozarks are not only in Arkansas, but in southeastern Missouri, is, of course, an earthquake-prone area. The New Madrid Fault, with its huge, long history, going back to 1810, 1811, they had such a large earthquake, it reversed the Mississippi River in certain places, and artificial islands were made, and the banks of the Mississippi were carved anew, and it was huge earthquake. So there's still earthquakes there, and of course the view that John Durr and Michael Persinger took toward that, and those two people ought to be mentioned or described to your audience. Michael Persinger, and by the way, he died recently. I didn't know that. He died last year, August 14th, very recently.
Yes, he did, yeah.
2018. John Durr is getting along in years, but they took a look at southeast Missouri, and of course, just decided it was earthquakes.
Right. And we're going to get ready to go to break and things, and I want to talk a little bit about that, because in examining the Earthlight theory, you take a lot of time to talk about that, and I think that's incredibly important. And I also, when we get back from break, I want to learn a little bit about how you first got involved in all of this, and then what led you specifically to Yakima, and a little bit more about that area, because this is such a beautiful and important area, and it reminds me a lot of the Uinta Basin, with these wonderful catalogs of sightings that Junior Hicks did here, and that, people did there that you've mentioned, and it's critical, and that's how we're going to learn. So I'm really happy to be here with you again. You were on my show in, I think, 2017, and that might have been before I went to Norway. So much has happened.
Yeah, it was before. Of course, that area, Hessel, just balls of light phenomena.
Right, and interestingly enough, we opened the show, you were talking about Hynek, and Hynek actually went there towards the end of his life and thought that was a wonderful living laboratory as well. So
exactly, yeah.
It's amazing, and there's so much to talk about, and I look forward to sharing more. I'm Erica Lukes here with Greg Long, and we'll be right back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Toxins are everywhere, from the air we breathe to the food we eat and the water we drink. In a world where 80,000 known toxins and heavy metals threaten our very existence, how are you going to protect yourself and your loved ones? Introducing Pure Body Extra Strength, the world's first colloidal zeolite that helps trap and remove toxins as well as heavy metals from your body that are messing with your memory, clarity, sleep, and focus. Don't just take our word for it or the testimonials from our thousands of happy customers. Check out the hundreds of articles and case studies on the National Institute of Health website proving zeolite's powerful ability to remove toxins. For a limited time, listeners to KCOR will receive 10% off their first order. To get started, go to trypurebody.com and enter promo code RADIO10. Again, that's trypurebody.com. Toxic junk is all around us, but now you can take back control of your health and protect yourself by detoxing with Pure Body Extra Strength. You'll be on your way to sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and feeling more energetic. Go to trypurebody.com right now and get started today.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
based on the concept that Plato simply called the Great Year, where evidence points to our world civilization being far older than we've been taught. The Emissary, Book 1 by Tamra Veach and Rennie DeFazio, embraces this concept while blending elements of fantasy, reincarnation, action-adventure, and ancient secrets all together, along with our real-world history, to create an epic tale that will leave you asking the question, is this real? The Emissary, Book 1, now available for 99 cents for a limited time at Amazon.com.
We interrupt to bring you this.
Would you like to advertise on KCOR Digital Radio Network?
This is what I'm talking about.
At a fraction of the cost of traditional radio advertising, why not?
Tell them the good news.
Whether you need to promote your next book, product, or service, we can customize a package for just about any budget.
Finally, there is hope for the hopeless.
Why limit yourself to a tiny local market when KCOR can brand you to the world?
Here's all you do.
Visit KCORradio.com or contact our sales department by email at saleskcorradio.com.
We want it now!
See the difference with us by letting us work for you.
This ain't reality TV!
The KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Are you ready to go? Turn your radio.
It's showtime!
Here we go, world. You're listening to the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Bring this up.
Broadcasting from the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada.
Their base is so large it has to draw most of its power from the nearby nuclear fusion plant.
The future of radio is here and now.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts!
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, I'm Erica Lukes. I was happy to be here on KCOR, the best place on the planet. I'm so blessed to be here and to have Tina Marie as my producer and station manager. I love it. I would much rather be here on this network than do a YouTube show or do things like that, because I know the quality of the show that I have is exceptional, and I also don't have to worry about it. She takes care of me. It's great. With that said, this is a listener-supported show, and I appreciate all of the people who have reached out to donate. That means the world to me. I couldn't do it without you. This is a labor of love, and as I said at the very beginning of my show tonight, this is not just about me. This is about all of us and trying to move through all the nonsense and disinformation and to get good information out to the public, specifically a younger generation who is coming into this and they have no concept of the history of this subject, and that is frightening. So we're going to see all sorts of people, standing on the border of Area 51 and looking at Bob Lazar and looking at all of these things when there are researchers who are passing away, who have dedicated their whole lives to this subject, who have contributions, and we need to remember them. I bring them on my show. It is important and critical for all of us. So there's my little spiel. Sometimes I get on these roles and I feel so passionate about it, but we have to pay attention to the work of people that have come before us. So on that note, I am here because I love researching this. I love working with different people. Barry Greenwood, as you know, is my mentor, and he is teaching me how to archive and preserve history. He put me in touch a few years ago with Greg Long, and I had told Barry, you've got to get me in touch with him somehow, some way. Please tell them that I am somebody that isn't just going to come in and come out and leave and discredit his work. I really care about it, and praise the Lord, Greg Long agreed to communicate with me. He came on my show a couple years ago in April of 2017. You can listen to that show. And he's here again tonight. He wrote a book called Examining the Earthlight Theory, the Yakima UFO Microcosm, and has spent decades taking newspaper clippings and reports from all over the world and putting them into a catalog for us, which he's given to Barry Greenwood. Barry Greenwood is scanning, and this is just, it's so beautiful and critical, and I'm grateful. So, Greg, thank you again for being back on the show. Like I said, your book is in my top 5, and one of my other top 5 books of all time that I recommend people, you mentioned this earlier, to read is the Utah UFO Display, which was written by Frank Salisbury, who was here in Utah and took the work of Junior Hicks, who spent a lot of time, who lives in the Uinta Basin, and has cataloged things for the past few decades. And you mentioned in the first half an hour, you were talking about a handful of people that were very critical in documenting Yakima. I mean, David Akers, Bill Vogel specifically, who was a supervisor in the Fire Control Division on the Indian reservation. But without their work, you wouldn't be able to build on that. And that is so cool.
Well, yeah, that's true. And I really found out about the Yakima sighting sort of by accident. I had worked on a master's degree in Fort Collins, Colorado State University, and after that I needed a job. And to a fellow academic student was working on his, he decided he wanted to leave. He went back up to Washington, and he got a job as an editor out at the Battelle Laboratories. That's out at Hanford. That's the location where one of the atomic bombs, Fat Boy, I think is the name of the bomb, was being built. Richland, Washington was kind of a government town built from the scratch, basically, for employees who had sworn to secrecy in terms of what they were building, and they didn't know it was all compartmentalized, so, certain engineers would build parts of this thing and so on and so forth. Anyway, and by the way, there have been sightings at Hanford. That's another completely other subject. But I was interviewed there, and then the day came to move there. I was married to my first wife, and we moved up there to Richland. On the day we checked into this motel, and we would take a week to find a place to live. There was a newspaper, the Tri-City Herald, that was on the rack. I picked it up and was looking through it, and there was a picture of Bill Vogel. He was inspecting these slides, and it was a very straightforward, nice little piece on him and what he was doing, and the fact that UFOs were legendary at the Yakima Indian Reservation. And I thought, I've come to the right place. Because I had been studying UFOs on my own, that is reading and subscribing to MUFON and all sorts of things for many, many years, and retained some skepticism still because I hadn't seen anything. I really hadn't talked to any witnesses. I really wanted to get involved. So I eventually, after a year or two of getting settled in, we had 2 small children, I contacted Bill Vogel and met him there in Toppenish, Washington, and went to his home and had this wonderful time with him just looking at his reports and his slides, and I was just flabbergasted. I was bowled over by this because he had so much of it, and he clearly was a responsible man. He worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the Department of the Interior on the reservation, and the reservation's very large, and there's a lot of leased land to non-Yakima Indians that people live there on the reservation, farming primarily. There's a lot of fruit that's grown in the Yakima Valley. Apples, of course, same as Washington apples, and hops, which is probably the biggest producer of hops. But so it's an agricultural area. It's east of the Cascade Mountains, but it's near Mount St. Helens, not far from Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams, and of course the whole Cascade Range. But I met him, and I was just flabbergasted. Well, I went home kind of stunned, and I thought about this, and I said, I think I said to him before I left, I'd love to be able to talk to any witnesses up here. And he said, yeah, I'll give you some names. So he did, and I made another trip and talked to some people. And before you know it, I was going up there quite frequently. And finally, I said, how about the fire lookouts? Can I interview them? Because they had been reporting these things to Vogel. So I met with the fire lookouts, and they had brought their logs, journals and logs that they had kept for, in some cases over 20 years. And went through them. I had gone through them all. And I taped them and interviewed them about these sightings, these entries in their logs. And I said, that has to be published. This for the first time, we now have these observers who are trained, and they stay up on these fire lookouts for months at a time. Now, the fire lookouts are no longer as active because satellites are doing the work for a lot of this, fire spotting. But they were, an old guard, if you will, last generation of these fire lookouts, and it was just an amazing experience with them. I then approached Vogel again, and I said, look, you got all these reports yourself. How about putting this together into something, like a book? And he was quite open to that. So I began this, I call it not sort of drudgery in a way. You got to go through all the reports, and you got to find out, what do these mean? I mean, where were they seen? Can you map them? Can you find out, based upon the fire lookout estimates of distance and so on, where they were located? So before you knew it, I was making a map and putting pins on it, and was looking at this prevalence of this ball of light phenomenon, which was most of the reports, but there were also this additional set, as I said, of craft. We call them craft-like objects, and objects that chased automobiles. And by the way, there's a whole subset of reports, which I wish someone would do, is go through all the literature and pull out every single report of balls of light. Typically, there's like one of them that someone's on a lonely road and a ball of light suddenly appears next to their window and scares the heck out of them, and they end up trying to flee it, and it follows them and sometimes shoots ahead of it and is hovering over the road in front of them. Anyway, that's just an amazing
Right. And you know what, you mentioned that, and I'm sorry to just kind of interject here, but I've got two stories of witnesses that I've talked to, one here out by the Great Salt Lake, and then another person who was on his way back to a military base and observed this ball of light, and it kept pace with the car and seemed to move through trees, and then actually came in and, according to the witness, hit the car and pushed the car off the road. And so, yeah, that would be a fascinating thing to do. You're right.
Yeah, definitely. This is just tangential to it, but Mark Rodiger, the director of CUFAS, put together quite a number of years ago a whole catalog on electromagnetic effects on automobiles. I don't know if you have that, but you ought to get it.
I do have that, actually. Yep.
Oh, it's just quite amazing. That's another subset, the stoppage or stoppage of cars when objects approach, and then the magical restarting of the engine without them touching their ignition. It's shown quite eloquently in what movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But to go back to the book, so the book now, it was all of this essentially sorting and collating and looking for patterns and trying to figure out, where these were seen. And then, of course, the logs, which I actually decided to make an appendix of them. They're not very long entries, some of them. I thought, so the thing began to take shape. How do you tell this story, So I mapped it out basically from day one to where whatever the present was at that time. But Bill Vogel died before the book was finished, unfortunately. I was working full time, and it's kind of hard to write a book and do all this research while you're working and having two little boys. So it took a while, but I was really gratified when I finally sent the manuscript off to Mark Rodiger. Actually, Heineck, Dr. Heineck was alive at that time. I did get a letter from him, basically as a note saying, it looks really interesting. I'll look at it when I come back from blah, 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 blah. He's running out of the office. That was a pattern, and, I never met Dr. Heineck, and it's easy to be critical of him, but he was a man who was in pursuit of reports. He wasn't sitting at a computer in a quiet office. study or whatever, working on all this data that has been gathered. But there's so much data, Eric, as you know, it's mind-boggling how much exists. And Jacques Vallée has said there's enough data now to actually solve the problem. Collecting reports, it's been going on since right after World War II, and now we've got enough that we can actually go in there and see what's going on. But so the book was finally edited down. It was quite long, and on that one portion of that book, which we might want to mention to your audience, is the tectonic strain theory, which is kind of taken on the chin a lot. Could be still, I think it should be considered to some level. Tectonic strain theory is basically in an earthquake-prone area, and the Yakima is in an earthquake-prone area. It's not far from the Cascades, and those mountains are still volcanically active to some level. Mount St. Helens probably being more predominant, but I've read reports that Mount Rainier still has some volcanic activity, minor earthquakes and that sort of thing. But this theory, the tectonic strain theory, is that we do live on tectonic plates, as you know, huge plates. The North American plate, which is subject to the pressures from the Pacific plate, which is actually pushing itself under the North American plate. The plate is moving. We're actually moving all the time. We just don't perceive it very slowly, but we're moving. Since we live on a basically like an eggshell underneath the shell of the egg is molten, iron and other rock, and the planet's still very hot. So the theory basically says in these areas there's a lot of stress, and the stress will build up at earthquake faults. And that stress is occasionally released in minor earthquakes. Now, these are very small ones. These are undetectable. You may never feel them. Microquakes they're called, like a magnitude 1, 2, or 3, sometimes 4. Although, I've recently felt a 4 one here in our area. There was an earthquake about a month ago, not far from here, and woke up at the night and heard a bunch of shaking and rattling, and Pat's awake going, hey, I think we're having an earthquake, which we were. But that area has the ridges. There's ridges that sort of bound the main portion of the reservation where most of the citizens are living. And there's the Atanum Ridge and Toppenish Ridge. Toppenish Ridge is lined with old faults. It's basically basalt that's been uplifted during ancient times into forming these ridges, and between them is, you might want to call it a basin, and it's flat, it's pasture land, it's farming, and so along that ridge there were lights appearing. The residents living below the ridge were seeing these strange lights. They were up on the ridge and moving on above them and hovering and doing odd things, and so they contacted the local police, and these reports started coming into Vogel, who was skeptical of UFOs. I don't think he ever saw anything before his fire lookout started reporting them. He was skeptical until one night he went out on Highway 395, which runs north-south on the that would be the west boundary of the reservation, and he was going out looking for any possible fires. There had been a storm earlier. One of his jobs is to go out and see if there's any small fires that were not detected. And he was there when he noticed this light up in the sky, and he pulled over and got out of his car with a camera, and he said it was shaped like a teardrop, and it was flashing lights on it. There were flashing lights on it. And he took several pictures of it. It was moving very slowly, very, very slowly. It was not a star in transit. If you sit out long enough and look at stars, you'll see them moving. They're not really moving. We're moving in relationship to them, but they'll move from your left to their right as the Earth is turning counterclockwise. But he was good enough observer to know this was not a star. It was moving. And that kind of got him thrilled, I think. Because then he started to take it more seriously. See, some of these reports had been trickling into his offices before that photo of his, And he kind of poo-pooed them, there's some people coming in with strange stories, and he kind of ignored them. Well, finally he realized there's something going on here. And then things kind of broke from there, kind of burst open. So between roughly 1971, 1975, but really heavy between 1972 and 73, there were all of these balls of light, many of them being seen by the fire lookouts and logged in, as I said. And Acres got involved, and it's an obviously real phenomenon. They're round, they're orange. Some of the photographs show that they have a core, sort of a core within them, which is like yellowish red maybe, or white, And they move around, and they go out. They're gone. Now, that's typical UFO behavior, right? I'm not saying they're UFOs, but UFOs will suddenly just vanish. They either shoot out of sight at extraordinary speed beyond any capability of any aircraft, or they might be hovering and they just vanish. They're just instantly gone. And so that's what they were doing. I don't recall many reports, or maybe any, of balls of light that were shooting off into the distance. They would usually move away out from view, or they would just go out. And, as I said, the top of this ridge is lined with old ancient faults. So it kind of made sense. Maybe this is what Durer Persinger call an earthquake light, a form of an earthquake light. There actually are earthquake lights during earthquakes. Typically they're during earthquakes. They may be minutes or an hour before an earthquake strikes. Glows of light on the horizon. There can be fireballs. They're called fireballs in the literature. The Japanese has recorded many, many of these, but unfortunately they're in Japanese. The books, they ought to be translated. But flashes of light, whitish blue or white flashes of light, glows, sometimes fireballs, streamers of light, and that sort of thing. Now, those are, in my opinion, distinctly different than balls of light moving around slowly.
Right, and I want to mention Paul Devereaux and Marcia Adams, because both of them have, Paul Devereaux with Earthlight's Revelation, which specifically talks about that, and I know that you've mentioned him before as well. So,
yeah, Paul Devereaux, when my book came out, he had put a book out either right before it or right during it, and he corresponded with me. I was just looking at some of his correspondence. And Paul Devereaux, I don't know what he's doing now, but he's British, and so ley lines, the L-E-Y lines, ley lines. Probably your audience is familiar with those. Mapping ley lines, stones that are aligned, straight lines in the different places, supposedly, or areas of what do you want to call them? Force fields or focal points for entering another dimension or receiving communications or whatever these things are. That's a little far out for me, but the Earth, he's very much into Earth mysteries. In other words, there's an intelligence within the Earth that is in some way coming out of the Earth. So he's sort of into that sort of thing, and that these lights are intelligent, and who knows, maybe they are intelligent. Because there were reports on the reservation of lights following cars. I did found an interview. I came across it the other day. It's on. I taped an interview with a Toppenish police officer, and he had heard of reports of lights, and other police officers knew that lights were being reported. I think these were more toward the Mount Adams or toward the west area of the reservation. But he got these reports, and one of these lights followed him. And if I recall, it left him for a while. He kept driving, and suddenly it just came right in front of his car. Of course, it scared him, So, the police were seeing them, which kind of raises the level of credibility for these things. I think that's very important when you look at these areas. Who's seeing them? What are their credentials? What's their background? Are they observers? Are they level-headed? How rational are they? Do they have any opinion on what they're seeing? Are they just reporting it? And that sort of thing. And so the tribal police also, the Yakima tribal police also monitor and drive throughout the reservation, and they're game wardens that I'd love to talk to. one of the police officers there on the reservation suggested I get a hold of game wardens because they're out at night looking for poachers and protecting, wildlife, and of course monitoring them and watching what's going on with the wildlife on the reservation. Beyond the top of this ridge, there are areas that are uninhabited. The Yakimas have a timber industry in the interior of the reservation, and this is off limits to anyone who's not a Yakima or someone authorized to be back in there. And so Vogel would sometimes get reports of things back in there, but he couldn't get back in there, I do recall there's a British team came out to do a production for Devereaux. Devereaux had come up with funding, and he put together a little documentary, which I am kicking myself because I can't find it in my house. It's got to be here. I'd love to digitize it and get you a copy. It did appear on television like twice, and that was it, The History Channel may have carried it or something like that, but this crew came out, and I took them over to the reservation. And we actually went into the tribal council meeting to introduce ourselves and get permission and have them understand what we were doing. I was kind of a guide, and they were photographing and interviewing people. Well, the tribal chairman, who had before been at a lower level on the reservation, I don't remember what his role was, who was now the tribal chairman. And he voluntarily just said, "Oh yeah, I remember back in whatever the year was, we got these reports of these lights, back there, behind top of this ridge, and they were like flashing lights, and people thought there were police cars back in there. So we went out to look and never could find them. No found evidence of nothing." So the reservation is replete with these stories. I'm kind of frustrated that I haven't been able to go back out because I'm sure there's more stories of sightings.
And then maybe I need to come up and visit you, and then we can go do that. And I heard the music, and so we've got to take our first big break. I'm Erica Lukes here with Greg Long. You're listening to UFO Classified. We will be right back.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows, visit her website at UFOclassified.com. UFO Classified. UFO Classified. UFO Classified. This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51. Wait, that doesn't exist. This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news. KCOR Las Vegas.
All the time.
Of course I listen.
I listen all day. It's the best music.
KCOR, the new underground source for news, talk, and music at KCORradio.com. Tell your friends, email them, or Facebook them, or Twitter them.
Hey, are we done here? Because I'm losing my buzz.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the second half of UFO Classified. I swear my show always goes way too quickly, and I could talk to my guests for days and days. There isn't anybody that I don't bring on that I really don't feel they have a lot of important things to say. And I mentioned at the beginning of the show and at the top of when 30 minutes into it, that I really became familiar with Greg Long pretty early on into my public foray into UFOs, and I've understood the importance of his work and the importance of studying specific areas, and I also understood the importance of NARCAP and what Executive Director Ted Rowe has done with regard to commercial and military pilot sightings, and Project Sphere, which is a great research paper, and I highly recommend that. I also think going to Project Heshton is important as well. So there are lots of things, or reading Project Identification, which was, another example of looking into this. It's a very serious study, and we forget about that. A lot of times, in the United States specifically, we sit behind a computer and we are looking for one specific case that is going to, show the whole world that the mothership has arrived. And that's not what we're looking at. And I think that's what I respect. Well, I know that's what I respect about Greg Long, because he understands that this is all about looking at the data and studying an area for decades, and that's important. So, Greg, I want to welcome you back again. This means a great deal to me to have you on, because not only do I consider you a friend and a respected colleague, but the respect that you have from others in the field. A lot of people that are off the grid because they don't want to involve themselves in quote unquote ufology. I mean, you have a lot of people behind you because of your work.
Well, that's nice to hear that, because I'm kind of a private guy. I guess I can say my wife is not feeling very well, and so I have to, or it's not a burden, but I stay indoors a lot, and I have time now to do a lot further organizing this material. You mentioned Project Identification. Maybe we ought to chat about that just briefly. It's kind of similar to what happened at Yakima. Now here, and what fascinates me about it is that the orange balls of light and craft that were being seen in southeast Missouri was in the early 70s. Okay, 71, 72, 73, and so on, and they petered out. And what's similar to Yakima is you had a technical mind, Harley Rutledge, who was the chairman of the physics department at Southeast Missouri University. He was, had a healthy skepticism, but some curiosity about UFOs. And when he heard of some sightings going on in Piedmont, which is in southeast Missouri, but it's kind of like at the edge of southeast Missouri, where you might say northeast Missouri starts. Little tiny town. There's a reservoir there. People were seeing lights near this reservoir, and that's common among the literature. You'll see lights or objects near reservoirs, some of them coming out of the water of reservoirs, which is a whole other subject. And but there were so many of them, he said, something, I'm curious about this. So he went out there, and it didn't take him long to see these things. And before you know it, he had a lot of students working with him with instruments. One of the students had an aircraft he could fly, and there's a report in his book of what they saw while they were flying, which convinced him. That was when he was really convinced. And so he went out there, and he got backing from the St. Louis, I think it's just the St. Louis Democrat. I'm not sure the name of the paper, if that's completely accurate, but the St. Louis main newspaper did fund him, okay? The stipulation being he would report, provide information to the newspaper to publish. And sadly, I don't have any of those articles. Tough. What am I going to do? I guess I'll have to go to St. Louis. But he went out there for years and put together a book and did sort of pattern analysis, similar to what I did for Yakima. And he concluded the orange ball of light was a predominant, object. Now, there is, as typical, some question, McDonald McDonnell Douglas has a facility there in the St. Louis area, and he identified a corridor where their planes would be tested and flown, and raised some suspicions that maybe some of this were things that were being seen were aircraft. Not atypical to Yakima. South of the reservation, there is an Army installation where there's training. You can sometimes drive in the reservation at night and see flashes of light coming behind a Tandem Ridge, because the training facility is behind a Tandem Ridge to the south, and you'll see flashes and go, "What the heck is that?" Well, what they're doing is they're setting off ammunition, firing guns and that sort of thing. So military aircraft, kind of near the reservation. There could have been some misidentifieds there. And that's the challenge, Eric, as you know, is how do you sort through this stuff? How do you make a decision what not to pursue and what truly is a misidentified object, an IFO, an identified flying object? And the only way to do that is to go to the witnesses, interview the witnesses. Now, newspapers can provide you information, which in some cases is trustworthy if you can get a hold of the writer, or just look at the detail and the quality of the writing. You get a sense when you go through this material an iffy kind of story, there's not enough there's not enough data. Then you come across well-written pieces where the reporter has gone and really talked to the witness and gathered information that's firsthand. But that's a famous area, so your listeners might want to pick up this. His book is rare. Oh, it's not that rare. Go out to Amazon or some other sites, these used book sites, so you can find it. Project Identification. It's a little bit written in a confusing manner, I think, but you can get it if you just plow through it.
Right, and I will say that it's got the price tag is rivals yours.
Well, and of course, and then take Frank Salisbury's thing. Now, so the question is, earthquake stress. Is there earthquake stress in southeast Missouri? Yes, there is. The New Madrid Fault is there. There are smaller quakes there all the time. There was a debate several years ago that the New Madrid Fault may become active again. Essentially, two massive blocks of, if you want to call it this, rock slipped at, thousands of years ago, or was slipping thousands of years ago, and in 1810 they really slipped, and this caused the major earthquakes, 7 and 8 level earthquakes in that area. And I mentioned Missouri, the Mississippi River being rerouted and that sort of thing. So, and during Persinger, go back to the tectonic strain theory, we just showed that away. Well, it's earthquakes. And it's caused by earthquake stress, all this stuff. But I've challenged them. I said, what do you do with these craft-like objects? How do you explain those are occurring at the same time? And I will always get an answer from John Durer or Michael Persinger to the effect, well, we can't explain them. Because they're not interested in that. So hopefully they weaned those particular cases out of the cases they would qualify in their minds as being a plasma form of some sort, a ball of light. Yeah, so I don't know. The statistics, Michael Persinger was a statistician, and I've tried reading his papers, and I just can't. I'm not a statistician. I'm not a mathematician. I really can't understand it, tell you the truth, except, he went through the data and just kind of concluded that's what it had to be. Now, Hestelin, we mentioned that one too. I don't know, Eric, if there's a book out yet on Hestelin. Actually, there is. I did get one. I don't remember the title. I haven't finished it. It was really who went out there to look at what was going on in Hestelin. I think he had some sightings, but a total overview of the entire of that I don't think exists in book form. It's all in individual reports. Well, and I just have to talk about when I was in Norway, that was such a special time period for me because I had interviewed you, because I had talked to I mentioned this, Dr. Massimo Teodoranti, who is an astrophysicist, an Italian astrophysicist, and Ted Rowe, and all of these different people who had a great deal to offer me from different perspectives, and so I really
respect and admire people that understand that there's something bigger. And being in Norway was it was such a refreshing perspective because there was nothing. Here in America, we get we're so derailed with all of this crap and this nonsense and this whatever we're doing in the UFO community and things that we don't look at these wonderful places like Yakima. We don't look at the work that is truly important, like Dr. Michael Swords, who I would love, love, love to have the honor of having him on the show, or all of these great people. And there's so much out there that we need to really look at. And like I mentioned, it's a critical time.
Well, it is, and it's an advantageous time for people who want to be serious about it, because the Nimitz incident, and I'm sure your audience must know about those sightings, the Luis Elizondo, former CIA operative, and the Pentagon study on pilot sightings and other UFO sightings. I mean, there's certainly something hard there. Even President Trump was briefed on it. And I don't know if he said something coy or not, but he just said we're watching it or whatever. So, and the radar returns on those objects. I mean, there's something truly there, and what its purpose is always sort of amazed me, because why do we have these areas where this ball of light and other UFO type activities occurring, and it's like an outburst of it. It's a sudden, concentrated set of these things happening, and then they kind of fade away. I mean, I don't think necessarily that's the media having them fade away. Maybe that's a portion of it, but it's such a coincidence to see that they're happening in the early to mid 70s. Some of these things, which interestingly. Mentioning Barry Greenwood, of course, in 1975, in November, I believe, November of 75, if I got that right, where the overflights and close approaches to the northern tier of the Strategic Air Command bases, in the northern states, Montana, North Dakota, and so on and so forth. And what was going on there? You had lights appearing in these other places, and now you have these approaches to nuclear missile facilities. And so I don't know. That's the reason why, if you want to study this thing and contribute to it, is you need to get a hold of a lot of the literature, get the main literature you need, and then be skeptical, I think, about what's on the internet completely. I mean, you got to be a little skeptical about this.
Pretty much really, really skeptical.
Yeah, I noticed recently there seems to be these reports of a snake-like lighted thing that's been seen around the country. Have you been reading that thing?
No. Am I missing something?
Okay. I don't think you are. It sounds like someone's pulling a prank to me. I mean, it's like a snake, so it's sinuous, and it's moving around like a snake, and it's lighted. And I don't recall the states where it's been seen, but it kind of appears here and there.
Okay.
I don't remember anything like that in the UFO literature. I mean, I don't think that is a UFO, and you wouldn't know that unless you study the subject.
Right.
But of course, I'm always just absolutely, NASA. There's all of these accounts of objects being seen near the space lab, the space station up there, and during the flights to the moon and this sort of thing. I stay away from that. I mean, you're not going to get NASA to tell you very much. They haven't got time to deal with people who are looking at video feeds on cable and are swearing that they see something strange near the space station. So you have to be careful of what you're doing when you get into the field and sort of get a broad overview. And of course, you've got a wonderful overview. I think your library must be expanding exponentially, right?
You know what, it is, and I look forward to I want it to grow, and it's the thing that makes me so happy is it's in a commercial space, it's open to the public, and there's not a person that doesn't come into my place of business that I'm not saying, okay, here you go, and here it is, whether you want to learn about this or not. This is what you've got, and I am amazed at the people that I bring in there that don't care about the topic, who eventually are mesmerized and then say, oh, you know what, 20 years ago, or oh, hey, guess what, I actually was best friends with one of the Shermans at Skinwalker Ranch growing up, and it's just like,
oh wow,
wow, yeah, I mean, it is so amazing to me, just when you put the things out there and you open people's minds, or you just make them think. It's been a really beautiful process for me, and it makes me happy that I can continue that and try to carry on the work of people who are mentoring me. It's very cool.
Yeah. I mentioned on our break this report. If you have time, real quickly, I'll try to summarize part of it. Here's a letter that was dated March 13th, 1967, that went to CUFOS. A woman is the writer. She had an experience in 1952, so we're going back a lot further than 67. She was living in Merced County, California, in a town called Stevenson. I don't know where that is. She was outside at 4 o'clock gathering some clothes. Apparently they were on a line. It was in springtime, kind of chilly. It was clear, no clouds, nice day, a little bit of a wind. So she's out there gathering clothes, and she happens to notice a bright orange-red light. Now, this is daytime, 4 p.m. It's about the size of a dime at very high altitude in the southeast sky. Now, she lived near Castle Air Force Base. Maybe Castle Air Force Base still exists, I don't know. So she was quite familiar with military aircraft. She would see them flying over, running their running lights, and so on and so forth during daylight too. It was so huge, this light, very very bright. She watched it, and she noticed it wasn't moving. Then suddenly, and I'm reading from the letter, it seemed to come straight at a tremendous rate of speed. Of course, the size increased in proportion as the distance shortened until it looked like a huge reflector light, the kind they put on bikes. It then seemed to come to an abrupt stop and hang over an adjacent field, which was a Gallo winery vineyard. Then it started bouncing. It looked like a giant orange-red yo-yo. It kept doing this for a few seconds, and it seemed to scoot backwards, then forwards, while maintaining its same altitude, which I roughly estimate about 100 feet. Then it hovered for a moment and shot straight up with that same tremendous speed it had descended with. No noise, no odor, no heat from it, couldn't feel anything, no wind coming from, nothing. Now, what was that? I'm not reading from the letter now. I guess I'm posing the question. Shall we have a ball light during the daytime? However, predominantly they're seen during night hours. In fact, most UFOs are seen during the night. But why would this appear at that time? And it seemed to clearly, I think, notice her because it came toward her. She was fearful, but she was also fascinated. Her fascination overcame her fear. So she didn't tell anybody except a girlfriend that she had at the time. So she was 15, so probably a fellow student maybe. She was afraid of being ridiculed. That's typical even today. She didn't read about it in the newspaper, but she never forgot it. So there was that's a report there, and it's just one sample of the sorts of things I am collecting and looking at. These lights, there are reports of them bouncing up and down and, as you know, splitting into two or merging back together, and it makes you feel like it's some sort of natural plasma of some sort. But the problem is the length of the sightings, and when they shoot toward a witness and stop and then bounce and go back and forth and then shoot off at tremendous speed, that kind of takes it out of the realm of plasma, in my opinion.
Right.
So we have to look at all the behaviors of these individual reports of balls of light to see what we're dealing with.
Well, and you've mentioned before, and I know that we're getting ready to go to break again. But you've mentioned that when these balls of light appear, that there are sometimes structured craft or other things that take place, like cattle mutilations. I mean, and so it's not just a ball of light. There are other things that are going on.
Yeah, there are. So an individual sighting at a place where there's no other reports that are known, you got to be a little skeptical about that. Could be a balloon. You know, one of the popular forms of balls of light today, and I've seen them out on YouTube, and it's clear when you look at the videos of this. They're balloons. They're lighted. They're Chinese lanterns. You know, for 3 summers in a row here in my home during the 4th of July, this neighborhood goes crazy. They've been told not to fire off fireworks, what they do anyway. But to the north, I will see an orangish-colored ball. And I go, oh my gosh, the first time I saw this, I couldn't believe it. And it was coming toward my house. And in fact, it passed right to the west of my house, right above a tree. But I could immediately see it was a balloon. It was like a clothes bag, which is the typical way, or used to be a typical way of having lighted balloons. Of course, they could catch on fire, but it looked like it was a diaphanous, very semi-transparent, balloon with some lighted lantern, little light or something inside of it, and kept moving with the currents of the wind. But if you go on YouTube, there's a lot of these lights, and of course, these people are amazed by them because they go, "Look at how many there are." Well, of course, someone, let up multiple balloons,
Right.
But you can I think you can see from some of the visual material that there's nothing to get overly excited about. But it's like any event in life. If you've never experienced something, then you're stunned and amazed by it. But then later you find out this has happened to other people. I'm trying to think of some examples of something that would be shocking to you. Seeing a huge meteor in the sky explode. Now, how many people have seen that? I haven't seen that.
No, I haven't seen that, and we're getting ready to go to break, but I just want to throw this in here. When I was state director for MUFON, because of the Chinese lantern thing, and that was such an easy way for lazy investigators to write it off, I did make calls to most of the states to find out what the restrictions were for Chinese lanterns, and they're not legal in a lot of areas. So,
yes, they pose a threat to aircraft, yeah?
Right. And so I'm Erica Lukes. I'm here with Greg Long. I will be right back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Are you ready? Ready to go inside the Matrix?
You see, whoever controls technology controls the world.
Then tune in Sundays at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, as your host, Jimmy Brent, takes you deep inside the holographic Matrix.
Carefully designed to stimulate the mind.
Come explore a world of topics from technology, archaeology, spirituality, and so much more. Inside the Matrix will liberate you from the manipulated, parasitic entities of consciousness.
You guys ready for this?
It's time to claim your true natures as creative, divine beings inside the Matrix. Hosted by Jimmy Brent.
Who are we talking about?
Jimmy Brent. Live Sundays at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Inside the Matrix. Investigating and analyzing the experience of life.
Vegas, baby!
Vegas' #1 source for talk and new music.
How cool is that?
There is a world outside that which we live in. A realm where fact and fiction collide. The Paradigm Matrix. Hosted by Willie Miranda. Every Friday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us, even now in this very room.
The 1-hour show that will surely leave you hanging on the edge of the rabbit hole. The Paradigm Matrix explores a universe of topics from UFOs, cryptozoology, conspiracies, as well as all things paranormal.
Enter a world of the twisted and deformed.
Friday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. The Paradigm Matrix. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, where fact and fiction collide.
This is the story of a very special woman. Just a few knew about her superpowers. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Alien Deceptions, a suspenseful sci-fi romance thriller by Tina Marie, featuring the tantalizing Erica Jones and the mysterious Russell Hamilton. An out-of-this-world book of fiction based on years of document facts and files the government does not want you to know about. At least, not yet. Alien Deceptions by Tina Marie. Available now at Amazon.com or get a signed copy at TinaMarieEntertainment.com. Get your copy now.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
It is with great sadness that I come back for the fourth segment. I always want my night to go on forever here on KCOR. I love what I do. It means the world to me to be here. And I will just say, and I was just thinking about this and had a little moment where I'm very proud of what I've done, because this isn't a show where I'm bringing on people who have a new book that they're trying to get out there, or they're trying to stay relevant on the UFO circuit. I do my homework behind the scenes. I'm not a radio host. I actually research this, and the people that I bring on each and every week have something relevant and important to say. And a lot of times people like my guest this evening do not make media appearances because they've seen, all the pitfalls that come along with it. But I'm so proud that they have been on my show. So please make sure you go back to my archives. You can go to KCOR or go to YouTube and listen to my shows. Each week I'm adding something new. And you can watch my process from when I first began, doing this, and watch me grow and watch the mistakes I've made and watch the momentum that I've built. And I'm proud of that. And it makes me so happy that you have all been there with me, supporting me. It is a really profound thing, and I'm going to try not to tear up, but it means the world to me. So I'm here tonight with Greg Long, who I've mentioned after each break. I tried to get a hold of. I'm so glad that Barry Greenwood got me in touch with him, but he did a book, and you need to get it. Go out. It doesn't matter if the price tag seems steep, it is worth the price. And I will tell you that if you pay, an $85 price tag for this book, it beats 20 of the books that are on the market today, because it will give you a lot more information. So make sure you get it. Examining the Earthlight Theory, the Yakima UFO Microcosm. Greg Long, welcome back. And I'm so happy that you and I crossed paths. You have taught me so much, and you've sent me articles about, the soil displacement and underground noises and all of these things, and also the ball of light, all of these reports that you've collected and sent to Barry Greenwood that he'll be getting out there. Your coolness just doesn't stop. And I'm not just saying that. I really, really mean it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I enjoy sharing information. Especially with people such as yourself, are quite serious about it. It takes, if you want to be a ufologist. I kind of hate that term in a way, because I don't know. No one is certified or licensed to be a ufologist. You can't go to a university or college and get a PhD in ufology. You might be able to do some papers, maybe a thesis. Maybe you could do your master's, perhaps, on UFOs. There are a number of those out there if you can get a hold of them. But you're serious about it, and I know you've had an experience, and you've gone to places to try to see what's there, and to be at least in the environment. It gives you a sense of where these phenomena are occurring. And and the ones that I have looked at, in addition to Yakima, and of course Missouri, I've looked at as well. They all seem to share a very common set of characteristics. Number one, the populations of these areas are not very big. Piedmont's probably not more than 1,000 people. Yakima is near the Yakima Indian Reservation is near Yakima, which is a sizable town. Toppage is not that large, but these are farming areas, agricultural lands. They're rural settings, and these rural settings seem to be a location where UFOs like to operate. I mean, if you read enough of these reports, and I'm not just talking about orange balls of light, someone might be driving a car at night along a highway, having visited a friend in a rural or desolate area, and maybe they have to drive 10 miles, 20 miles. Suddenly, a light appears, or a craft of some sort. You don't see these things being reported very heavily in cities, do you? I mean, I don't know of any of these UFOs hovering over a major building like the Empire State Building. There you go. For lengths of time where you absolutely know what this is strange.
Well, and I just have to throw this in there because is there too much noise? We're in a big city and we're going from point A to point B and we're not looking up or paying attention, and there might be too much distraction. Whereas if you're at a fire lookout, you don't have a lot of those distractions, and so you can, train your eyes to scan through. Right.
So the question is, if in rural areas and even further desolate areas, I'm talking about deserts. I mean, areas of land that have few human beings, but there's enough inhabitants, like in Hessdalen. I mean, Hessdalen, I think, is just a little tiny village of some sort, and some houses out there. I don't think it's very. Yeah, I guess you could comment on that more than me, but you get a sense of these settings. And the other thing about it, because there's not a lot of light pollution in these areas, and these occur usually at night, it's as if the night darkness serves as a perfect backdrop for one to see something, and especially when it's lighted. And that's always been something that's nagged at me. Why do UFOs, if they come from other planets or a planet, why do they have to have bright revolving lights in some cases around their rim? That's a classic UFO. Why do they make so much of light? If they're here on an operation that requires stealth, the night sky offers that stealth, but they seem to like to turn their lights on and scare the heck out of people sometimes. And why over and over and over again? Why is this happening? Now, one theory I have, and it's probably just common, it's nothing new, I mean, I'm sure you've thought of it and your listeners, is that in order to turn societies, an entire nation, for example, toward a belief in UFOs, and when I say belief, I don't mean a religious belief, but I mean, for example, I do believe the sun will come up tomorrow, right? I do believe it will shine. That's sort of faith in a natural event. And you see it, It could be that it's slowly and carefully over decades getting into the mind, so to speak, of people and turning them into thought processes and areas of thought and idea that are taking them someplace, okay? in their minds and into society. So they certainly have an effect on society. I'm sure Jacques Vallée, he talks about, how a thermostat is, it's like raised and lowered. They come and they leave a trace of themselves, and then they go away, and then they come back and they repeat it, and so on and so forth. And they do it in different geographical areas until they've saturated an entire nation, for example, with sightings. I don't know of any state in the U.S. that hasn't had, witnesses to UFOs. Even the plain states, where they're very, their population is fairly thin. But one area that I'm looking at in Indiana, and I'd rather not tell your audience and spoil it at this point. Again, it's a small town, has remained a small town, and that is where balls of light showed up, in a small town. Also, I have a study, a gentleman who's no longer living, but I did interview him years earlier and also recently by phone. He's now died of cancer, sadly, but lived out in a rural area, next to a small town, a few miles outside the town, began seeing these balls of light moving north to south, south to north, over and over again. They weren't aircraft. He became quite familiar with the flight patterns of aircraft in that area. He went up to try to find them. He never could. And so here's a single witness being, primed, prepared for, shaped and changed for something. I don't know. So there has to be a reason why they're in these areas. Now, earthquake faults are in a lot of them. You can't discount that. But again, the craft are there. So it's either misperceptions of man-made objects such as planes, balloons, gliders, anything that floats and man-made or floats or flies during an outburst of natural balls of light. That's a natural phenomenon. People are beginning to see other things because they're excited about reports of people seeing balls of light, and so suddenly an airplane becomes a saucer. So yes, there is some hysteria there. There is some wild thinking, and you mentioned the internet and a lot of these voices out in the sort of UFO field who are touting wild thoughts. And, of course, they're often referred to as the people wearing the tin hats, right? Mm-hmm. And it ridiculed and so on, and so the subject is demeaned. But there has to be some answer to why this has been happening. Culturally, socially, geographically, environmentally, there has to be an answer. I think the only way, like I've said, is take a look at the reports, go to the areas, try to see if there's some connection to, perhaps earthquake faulting, perhaps not, maybe it's purely coincidental. Now, I wanted to mention something. If you've seen the Unidentified series on, was it the History Channel that was with Louise Elizondo? There is an island which was south of the, I guess that was a Nimitz aircraft, the Nimitz ship exercise there off San Diego. I don't recall the name of the island, but he went out there with the compatriot. It was a Navy guy. He had seen the lights, or a light behaving strangely. And there was magnetic recordings. Either they made them or they were provided to him. A lot of magnetic activity in this island, And there's always been this interesting theme that runs through the UFO, literature. Magnetic activity, areas where there is intense or anomalous magnetic activity. And that'd be interesting if Elizondo ever manages to connect that to the sightings that he is studying. Maybe it's just purely coincidental. But it fits into the idea of ley lines again, and there's areas that are more, call them hot spots,
window areas, right.
Windows or vortices, vortex into some other dimension or area. Now, I'm moving around here quickly, but one thing that's struck me now is let's switch from the Unidentified series and take a look at Skinwalker. I did look at this George Knapp presentation. I'm sure everyone knows about this by now. It's out on YouTube. I think you've probably seen it, right? Where one of the witnesses says he sees what looks like a tunnel above the ground, not very high above the ground. It's lit on its interior, but the end of the tunnel, and there's some creature crawling through the tunnel to drop out of it onto the ground on the ranch. And this witness states that the tunnel itself, the end of it from which the creature was crawling, there was nothing there. It's as if it had poked itself out of another world, onto the ranch. Very odd, and of course Skinwalker has balls of light amongst other phenomena. So, kind of rambling around here a little bit, but we have to study not only the witnesses, but we have to look at the environments. Maybe there's clues there to something within the Earth or in these particular areas that are conducive to these phenomena.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's just being stealthy, doing it out in rural areas, and making their way slowly to convince everybody of their existence, and they have to do it through this manner of appearance. I don't really know. But anyway, that's a thought.
Well, and I have to say, I do believe that you might be referencing Dr. Eric Davis and his sighting on the ranch, and he was on my show talking about this. And so, there are, reports of things like this, as you mentioned in Yakima. And I want to ask you, with regard to some of the sightings up there, I mean, there was a specific family that you mentioned in the book that had encounters that were very similar to the people that lived at Skinwalker Ranch before Bigelow bought the property. So there were paranormal goings-ons, there were creatures, all sorts of things. Can you just give us a little bit of information about that?
Yeah, I think you're talking about this family that lived on top of this ridge. I went out there and talked to them, and they, I think they were just a family of three, husband, wife, and his son at that time. He was probably in his teens, if I recall, early 20s. They had what seemed to be Bigfoot activity, screams, odors. They had seen some objects in the sky near there. And what's similar to the Skinwalker Ranch is that this son was coming home on what's called Pump House Road, because there's a pump there, right? It's right along the edge, or right at the end of the sloping side of Toppenish Ridge. Okay, and it's dark because I've gone out there and it's pitch black. Nice place for an encounter. Well, this happened to this boy. He was driving home, and in his headlights, he sees a humanoid type being. Had arms and legs, and a head, and it had a symbol of some sort on its chest. Maybe you can remind me of what it is, but it seemed to me there was a symbol or something on its chest, and it was holding what looked like a ball in one of its hands, and its face was sort of death-like. It was a white, flowery face, looked like white flour. And he saw this being standing there, and suddenly it was on the side of the road, by the way. That was always be on the right side of the road. It suddenly jumped in a floating manner into the middle of the road and just stood there and looked at him. Well, this, of course, scared the heck out of him, as it would anybody. And he drove forward. I don't remember the details how this creature moved away, but he drove forward at rapid speed to get home. And as he's doing that, there's this lighted object that's appeared behind his vehicle, lighting the interior of his vehicle. And he has this psychic, I guess you might call it a psychic experience, if I recall, something to do with the death of a friend, I think. You have to help me out here. There may have been additional detail that I got since I wrote the book. But he was terrified. He drove home, told his parents about it, and he immediately drew it, by the way, and he drew it for me. And he retold the story exactly as Vogel had been given the story. He was quite serious about it. I think now he's a grown man now. I don't remember the exact date that this occurred. But that's one of the stranger experiences or reports on the reservation. I guess there's been figures, perhaps, at Skinwalker. You know much more about it than me. my introduction has been through you, bits and pieces of info, and also looking at the recent George Knapp presentation on YouTube.
Right.
But I think there's other strange things that are on the reservation. I did investigate a horse mutilation, actually. This was the day after another witness who videotaped an object behind his home, which I need to recontact him, in which he happened to see flying at rapid speed a meteor-type object, which is about from the floor of the Antietam Ridge up to the top. In other words, it wasn't above the ridge; it was low. Not a meteor, I don't think so. Not that low. This was, I think, early morning hours. It might have been early morning hours. He was preparing to go to work. Anyway, it turns out I was heading toward the direction where this ranch was. I didn't put that together until after I went out and met this caretaker of this ranch. It was a horse ranch. They raised horses, and one of the prized horses had been mutilated. And she got a vet out there to inspect it. She had to lift this horse up with a front loader and put it in the back of a truck. And I saw the horse. It was still there. Vet found out that, and the horse had been pregnant, by the way, had found out that the foal was gone. It was just completely missing. It had been ripped out of the uterus of the horse. And the horse had a death grimace. You could see its teeth just gritted together. It obviously suffered some sort of horrible death. And I took a lot of video and I photographs of that, and I don't know what to make of it. The caretaker was a young woman who called me up and found out about CUFOS at her local library. She wanted to report this to somebody, so she seemed quite legitimate. She didn't know much about UFOs, but that she had called me up, and that was a couple days after this earlier meteor had passed, right under or the middle area of the Antietam Ridge. You look at these things and you go, they've got to be connected. They've got to be connected in some way. But you can't quite get a direct linkage. You know what I'm saying? The creature seen there, or am I supposed to think it like came out of a ball of light? These balls of light can't be more than they range up to 50 feet in diameter as far as I can tell. I've been studying this for years. I mean, They're not technically huge, They're more like, 3 feet. They could be 3 feet up to 10 feet, something like that. So I don't know why did that creature occur at that time on the road for this young man, and why did that ranch up there, his family, have these other experiences? Well, they're isolated. They're alone. It seems to be that the UFOs like dark, isolated areas typically. In general. Certainly there are cases of things appearing, where highways come together and there's heavy traffic and that kind of thing. But these areas where there's a lot of concentration of these things over years, they seem to be in more or less isolated areas or thinly populated areas.
And so I have to ask you, because we're getting ready to close the show, but I mean, do you feel, because you've studied this for so long, is this a threat? Should we be gravely concerned about this?
Well, in looking through some of these reports, there are some reports of people getting burned, it seems like by lights. There's one case, and I don't recall the state, but a woman was driving home, and it was at night, of course, and a bright light approached her, and she either got out of the car or was taken out of the car or something, but she woke up later and was shaken and had burns, Now, that sounds more like a natural phenomenon, but, there's cases of burns by these objects.
Right, but I mean, when you look at it,
But an overall threat.
Right.
An overall threat. Well, the thinking is, and I kind of go along with it, is that if it was a threat that wanted to conquer the Earth, I don't know why it couldn't have done this a long time ago, Everyone marvels at the aerodynamics of these objects. The Pentagon obviously is interested in it. Why hasn't it, if it was here on a War of the Worlds theme to conquer the Earth and of course, the most recent War of the Worlds movie shows these creatures literally eating people. Pretty grim. That were food for these alien beings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why it hasn't done this. I'm not necessarily eat people, but why hasn't it just conquered the United States if it wants to do this? I mean, we're supposedly the most powerful militarily nation in the world. China is in there. There's other nations that have nuclear weapons: the United Kingdom, France, India. There's all of these wars that are going on among, unfortunately, humankind, and they must see us as a bunch of barbarians if they're that advanced. But what do they want? If they want anything, do they want our natural resources?
Right, and that's the $1 million question. And are they extraterrestrial? I mean, I have to. I mean, there's so many unanswered questions, and I think it's unfortunate that we're willing to say this is extraterrestrial or this is a threat. I mean, or this is, we're labeling things, and clearly we don't have enough information to do that.
Yeah,
and I fully believe that the threat that is being inserted now is more of a control system. And on that note, I hear that music. Greg Long, thank you so much for joining me. Make sure you get Examining the Earthlight Theory, the Yakima UFO Microcosm. It is great. Have a wonderful evening, and stick around for Willie Miranda, who is up next. I will catch you next week. Chris Marks is going to be on for part 3. Definitely won't want to miss that. Catch you next week.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south.